Hey everyone, I'm Geary. I'm a senior data scientist at Revel, and I'm excited to speak with you today about some of the work that we've been doing to electrify rideshare. Before I get started, do we have any Revel users in the audience? Can you raise your hand if you've ridden our rideshare or moped service? Okay, seeing some hands. So if you're not familiar, Revel is an electric mobility company based in Brooklyn, New York. In 2018, Revel launched with a fleet of electric mopeds available for rent through our mobile app. Here you can see the growth in rides taken by our moped users from our pilot of 68 mopeds in Williamsburg to a fleet of several thousand mopeds just 1 year later. Since launching our moped service, we've served nearly 10 million rides, saving nearly 30 million pounds of CO2 emissions compared to what would have been the case if those trips were served by gas-powered cars. Here's a photo showing a sea of mopeds in one of our warehouses about to be deployed into the world. Through launching our moped business, we've learned a couple of things. First is that grid capacity is scarce. Even with a fleet of mopeds having batteries that are much smaller than an electric car, we still had a difficult time finding warehouse locations that were well situated on the electrical grid and able to deliver enough power to charge our fleet. The second is no surprise that acquiring and developing real estate in urban cores is expensive and difficult. EV adoption is projected to grow exponentially in the coming years, and electrifying rideshare vehicles specifically is a major part of that. Consider this. The average American living in an urban area drives an average of 25 miles per day. New York City residents drive an average of just 9 miles per day. Compare that to an average rideshare or taxi driver who might drive 200 to 300 miles per day. What that means is electrifying a single rideshare vehicle will get you the equivalent emission savings as electrifying 20 to 30 privately owned passenger vehicles. With that in mind, it's no surprise why Mayor Adams recently announced that New York will require all rideshare vehicles to be zero emission by 2030, making it the world's first major city to do so. But where will all these EVs charge? The number one concern of prospective EV owners is the lack of availability of charging stations. Not only are there not enough chargers, but many of the existing chargers are non-functioning and unreliable. Over time, it became clear to us that there is a chicken or egg dilemma stalling urban EV adoption. On one hand, people who live in cities are reluctant to switch to EVs because they don't have easy access to charging. On the other hand, cities don't have enough fast charging because EV ownership is low. We know that grid real estate is scarce and expensive, and developers want to be sure that their EV charging stations will get enough usage before making the large investments required to build them. So how do we solve this problem? Our thesis is we solve the chicken or egg problem by pairing our all-electric, all-employee rideshare service with a network of ultra-fast, universally compatible EV charging superhubs. Revel Rideshare provides an electric option that riders can feel good about and creates demand for our superhubs, allowing us to build them in dense urban neighborhoods. Our superhubs power our rideshare fleet, personal EVs, as well as third-party fleets, easing the transition to electric for both consumers and professional drivers. By combining electric rideshare with EV charging, we are bringing our own source of charging demand. By making our superhubs accessible to the public, we are bringing the charging infrastructure to cities that need it. As you can see, that is one happy chicken. And a happy Mayor Adams as well. All of this background brings me to my main question: how to build an electric rideshare service. It's easy. First, you need some EVs. Next, you need to hire drivers, and then get some users. Finally, you need to build charging infrastructure to power your fleet, as well as to serve public demand. And finally, profit. Just kidding, it's hard. And embedded in each of these tasks are a bunch of key questions. For example, on the vehicle side, how many vehicles should you acquire? What areas should you serve? Growing a rideshare service is a balancing act. If you have too few vehicles, your users will experience long wait times. Too many vehicles means that drivers will be sitting idle. If you serve too small of an area, you're offering less utility. But if you serve too large of an area, you'll have longer wait times. So what we've done is take a staggered approach. First, launching a pilot program serving mid and lower Manhattan with a fleet of 50 Tesla Model Ys. After 1 month, we expanded north to 57th Street, and then more north to 72nd Street. In November 2021, we added service to JFK and LaGuardia airports, expanded further north, added service to Newark Airport. In June of 2022, we finally expanded service to parts of Brooklyn, which we continued to grow, and later expanded further into northern Manhattan and parts of Queens, and more parts of Queens. Finally covering all of Manhattan. And here we are now, serving all of New York City's 5 boroughs, plus the 3 major airports and parts of New Jersey, with a fleet of nearly 500 EVs and over 2,000 full-time professional drivers. At every step along the way, we use spatial data science to analyze and predict system dynamics, enabling us to make informed decisions about fleet size, service area, and the resulting outcomes, like customer experience, wait times, and driver utilization. How do we do this? First, we need data. Luckily, New York City has great open data. The Taxi and Limousine Commission publishes historical trip records from rideshare, yellow, and green taxis. This enabled us to develop a good understanding of the spatial distribution of rideshare demand before launching our pilot. Here, we're using the local Moran's Eye statistic to identify significant clusters and outliers, that is, hotspots, cold spots, diamonds, and donuts of the density of rideshare demand. Note that we're using a particular definition here of demand density, that is, average daily pickups per drivable street mile, as opposed to simply pickups per square mile. Quick shout out to 2 of my favorite Python libraries, OSMNX by Jeff Boeing for downloading street network data from OpenStreetMap, and PySal for doing things like creating spatial weights matrices to represent neighbors and analyze spatial autocorrelation. We also have more complex questions about system dynamics, such as, for a given service area and fleet size, what can we expect wait times to be? What about driver utilization? For questions like that, we use agent-based modeling. Here, every dot is an individual vehicle on a hypothetical day. The blue dots represent vehicles that have a passenger. Gray are vehicles that are sitting idle. And orange are rebalancing. What if we were to expand to Brooklyn? What if we add service to airports? We use agent-based modeling to model and compare future scenarios, which we then use to inform decision-making and set expectations. That was some of the work that we do on the vehicle side. What about on the driver's side? The key questions here are how many drivers to hire, how and where to find them, how to rebalance drivers, how to match incoming trip requests to drivers. From the city's data, we know that the majority of registered taxi and rideshare drivers are foreign-born and immigrated to the US. In particular, many professional drivers come from Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, the Dominican Republic, China, Ghana, Egypt, and elsewhere. So we used census data to analyze neighborhoods that contain clusters of immigrants from these key countries. And we use that to inform our driver hiring outreach and communications. On the left, you can see actual Revel driver residential hotspots, including Harlem, the Bronx, Jackson Heights, and Flatbush. Another shout out to a favorite tool. Tidy Census is an amazing R package by Kyle Walker, and it's my go-to for downloading census data. Now on to rebalancing. The population of New York City shifts drastically depending on the time of day and day of week. Here you can see the population of Manhattan swelling up during the day and decreasing at night. In order to serve this dynamic population, we need to constantly reposition our fleet to best match supply with demand. Rebalancing is the mechanism by which we move our drivers from areas of low demand, shown here in blue, to areas of higher demand, shown in red, to provide a better overall rideshare experience and lower wait times for our users. What about matching incoming trip requests with drivers? When we first launched, our logic was pretty simple. Just match a trip request with the closest available driver. Now we use batched matching. So instead of simply matching every request on a first in, first out basis, we group together rides that come in close proximity to each other to find possible optimizations for reducing overall wait time across the system. Finally, the charging infrastructure. The main questions here are, where can we build infrastructure? By which I mean, where do the physical constraints of the power grid and political constraints like zoning allow us to build charging stations? The other question is, given an understanding of where we can build, where should we build in order to best serve demand? Our goal is to build charging stations in dense urban areas, primarily to serve the rideshare use case. So we care about where rideshare demand is located. We also care about where professional drivers live. We know that drivers tend to charge either near their home at the beginning or at the end of a shift, or near where the demand is located if they're charging mid-shift. So we care both about where drivers live, professional drivers live, and where they work. Of course, we consider things like traffic volumes, where are major heavily trafficked roads located, as well as disadvantaged communities, both from a perspective of building an equitable charging system, as well as securing federal grant funding to do so. Finally, we analyzed the electrical grid. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to show you New York City's grid per Con Edison's rules, so instead I'll show you San Francisco's grid, which is publicly available. Here you can see transmission lines styled by their load capacity in kilowatts. Transmission lines carry electric energy from one point to another in an electric grid system. The higher the load capacity, the more power the transmission line is able to carry. Part of what's so exciting about this is the impact that we're already having on New York's EV charging landscape. This graphic compares the total time, and that's defined as access time plus charging time, across New York City before and after Revel's first super hub in Brooklyn. Professor Joseph Chow at NYU found through his own agent-based modeling that the average EV owner in New York City would save 21 minutes per recharge session, thanks just to Revel's first super hub. Finally, how to build a user base. Well, it helps that we had an existing user base from our moped service. And we do our best to keep wait times and prices competitive to provide the best possible service. And it's been going well so far. In August, we served our 1 millionth ride to none other than Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. So what's next for Revel? Well, a lot of exciting stuff. We have plans to develop several EV charging super hubs in the next 12 months, shown here, including sites in Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx. Some of these sites will be the largest EV charging sites in the Western Hemisphere, with 60-stall massive sites planned for Maspeth, Queens, and Hunts Point in the Bronx, and a 50-stall super hub in Harlem, not far from where we are now. I'll wrap up with some renderings of what we're designing and building now. Here's a render of our Port Morris super hub in the Bronx, our Red Hook super hub in Brooklyn, and our Pier 36 super hub in Lower Manhattan. And there's a bunch more that I can't show, including the large Harlem super hub coming next year. And that's all. Thanks, everyone. As a token of my gratitude, I'd like to offer you a ride credit. Thank you.